I spent 15 years taking care of our mother while my brother took vacations. When she died, they tried to cut me out of the will entirely. They didn't know I'd kept every receipt, every power of attorney, and the original will. The look on my brother's face when the lawyer slid those documents across the table, worth more than my inheritance. It was a Tuesday morning in October when I first noticed something was off. The maple tree outside Mom's nursing home had turned a brilliant orange, and weak sunlight filtered through the blinds onto the linoleum floor. I'd brought fresh flowers, sunflowers, her favorite, and was arranging them in the vase I'd bought last month when my phone buzzed with a text from my brother, Mark. At Mom's place. Need to talk about some paperwork. Come when you can. I frowned at my phone. Mark lived 3 hours away and visited maybe once every 2 months. He never came unannounced, and he certainly never handled paperwork. That had always been my job. The bills, the insurance forms, the medication schedules, the endless calls with doctors and facilities for 15 years. I'll be right back, Mom, I said, kissing her papery cheek. She smiled vaguely, already drifting back to sleep. The Alzheimer's had progressed rapidly in the past year. I found Mark sitting at Mom's kitchen table, the one I'd kept polished all these years, even though she hadn't eaten a meal here in nearly a decade. He wasn't alone. A woman in a charcoal suit sat beside him, papers spread between them. Sarah, there you are. Mark's smile was too wide, his voice too loud. He stood up quickly, knocking his knee against the table. The water glass beside him wobbled. This is Diane. She's helping us get Mom's affairs in order. I set my purse down slowly. Her affairs are in order, Mark. I've been managing them for years. Well, yes, the day-to-day stuff. He waved his hand dismissively. But we need to think long-term now. Mom's condition isn't improving. The woman, Diane, extended her hand. I'm a family estate planner. Your brother thought it would be helpful to review your mother's assets and update her will. I didn't take her hand. Her will was updated 3 years ago, after Dad died. Mark cleared his throat. That was just a stopgap. Mom wasn't thinking clearly even then. I stared at my brother. At 45, he was 5 years older than me, but looked younger. No gray in his hair, no permanent worry lines between his eyebrows. No wonder. While I'd been coordinating Mom's care, refinancing my house to cover what Medicare wouldn't, spending every weekend at doctor's appointments or nursing homes, Mark had been building his real estate business in Chicago. He called on birthdays and Christmas. Sometimes. Mom was perfectly lucid 3 years ago, I said quietly. The Alzheimer's diagnosis came 18 months ago. Diane shuffled her papers. Regardless, your mother has expressed some new wishes about her estate. When? I asked. When exactly did she express these wishes? Last month, Mark jumped in. When I visited. I remembered that visit. Mark had stayed exactly 47 minutes. Mom hadn't recognized him at first. And what are these new wishes? I kept my voice even. Mark and Diane exchanged a look. She slid a document toward me. Your mother wants to simplify things. The house and investments would go to Mark, who would then be responsible for your mother's continued care. It's cleaner this way. The room seemed to tilt slightly. The house, our childhood home where I'd been paying the property taxes for years. The investments, mostly Dad's retirement accounts that I'd carefully managed, making minimum withdrawals to supplement Mom's care. And what about me? The question came out softer than I intended. Mark had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. You'd get the personal items, of course, the jewelry, furniture, that kind of thing. I see. I picked up the document, scanning the signature line. The wobbling scrawl barely resembled Mom's handwriting. I knew that signature. I'd seen it deteriorate over 15 years of birthday cards, power of attorney forms, and medical consents. I set the paper down and stood up. I need to think about this. There's not much to think about, Mark said, his confidence returning. It's what Mom wants. And honestly, Sarah, it makes sense. I have the financial background to manage these assets. And I don't. You're good at the practical stuff, he said with a patronizing smile. The day-to-day care. That's always been your thing. I nodded slowly, picked up my purse, and left without another word. In my car, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. The practical one. That's what I'd always been. The one who stayed close to home after college. The one who checked in on Mom and Dad regularly. The one who stepped up when Dad's heart attack left Mom alone and increasingly confused. The one who'd put her life on hold. Over the next week, Mark called repeatedly. His voicemails grew increasingly irritated. Sarah, we need to finalize this. Mom's not getting any better. The lawyer needs your signature to move forward. Don't make this difficult. This is what's best for everyone. You know you're not equipped to handle Mom's estate. I didn't return his calls. Instead, I went to my basement and pulled out the filing cabinet where I'd meticulously documented the past 15 years. Every receipt for Mom's care, every bank statement showing the transfers from my account to cover shortfalls. The power of attorney forms Mom had signed when she was still lucid, naming me, not Mark. The original will from 3 years ago, properly witnessed and notarized, leaving the estate equally to both of us. I also found the folder of birthday and Christmas cards from Mom, back when she could still write. I don't know what I'd do without you, Sarah, she'd written in one. You're the only one I can count on, in another. Then I called my own lawyer. 2 weeks later, Mark texted me. Family meeting at Greenwood Law Offices tomorrow at 10. Bringing Mom. Time to settle this. I replied with a simple, I'll be there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mom's kitchen table, where this had all started. How many meals had I prepared there over the years? How many bills had I paid? Sitting in that same chair where Mark and his estate planner had plotted to cut me out? I arrived at the law office 10 minutes early, carrying a slim leather portfolio. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where Mark already sat with Diane and an older man I assumed was their lawyer. Mom was there too, in a wheelchair, looking smaller than I remembered, her white hair freshly styled. She smiled vaguely when I entered, but showed no sign of recognition. Sarah, Mark stood, all business now. This is James Greenwood. He's prepared the new will for Mom's signature? I nodded politely and took a seat across from them. Before we start, I'd like to understand why we're doing this now. Greenwood cleared his throat. Your mother has expressed a desire to simplify her estate planning. Given her condition, it makes sense to put the financial assets in the hands of someone with experience. And that would be Mark? I asked. Yes, your brother has a proven track record in real estate and investments. I see. And who's been managing Mom's finances for the past 15 years? Mark cut in. That's different, Sarah. That was just paying bills and stuff. Just the practical stuff, I echoed. Is that how you'd describe it? He nodded, relieved I seemed to understand. Exactly. You've been great with the day-to-day things. No one's saying you haven't. In fact, he continued, warming to his topic, that's why this makes sense. You can keep doing what you're good at, the practical stuff being the practical solution, while I handle the complex financial decisions. The room fell silent. Even Diane looked uncomfortable at how that sounded. The practical solution, I repeated softly. Is that what I am, Mark? He had the grace to flush slightly. You know what I mean. I opened my portfolio. Actually, I'd like to discuss Mom's current will, the valid one, from 3 years ago. Greenwood frowned. We're here to execute a new will. Based on wishes my mother supposedly expressed when she was already diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I said, when she sometimes doesn't recognize her own children. She has lucid moments, Mark insisted. Convenient that she had one exactly when you wanted to change her will. I slid a document across the table. This is Mom's medical assessment from 2 months ago. You'll note the doctor's specific comments about her inability to make complex financial decisions. Greenwood picked up the paper, frowning as he read. I also have this, I continued, sliding over another document. The durable power of attorney Mom granted me 5 years ago, specifically for healthcare and financial decisions if she became incapacitated. Mark's face darkened. That's for emergencies. Like someone trying to change her will when she can't understand what she's signing? I asked. Diane leaned forward. Ms. Williams, I understand you're upset, but your brother is only trying to create a more efficient arrangement. More efficient for whom? I pulled out another folder. These are the records of all the expenses I've personally covered for Mom's care over the past 15 years. It comes to just over $137,000. Mark's eyes widened slightly. And these, I continued, laying down bank statements, show the 3 withdrawals Mark made from Mom's investment account last year, totaling $45,000. The room went very quiet. Mark began. You used Mom's account password, the one I gave you for emergencies. I looked him directly in the eye. Was the boat an emergency, Mark, or the kitchen remodel? Greenwood was looking at Mark now, his expression hardening. This is ridiculous. Mark pushed his chair back. Mom wanted me to have those funds for all I've done for her. What exactly have you done for her, Mark? I asked quietly. In 15 years, how many doctor's appointments have you attended? How many nights have you spent in a hospital room? How many times have you cleaned up when she couldn't make it to the bathroom? Mom stirred in her wheelchair, making a small distressed sound. I immediately went to her, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hand. It's okay, Mom, I said softly. Everything's going to be okay. She squeezed my hand, her cloudy eyes finding mine for a moment of connection. I stood and faced the table again. I'm not here to fight about money. I'm here because Mom trusted me to protect her, and that's what I'm going to do. I pulled out the final document, the original will. This remains in effect. It divides everything equally between Mark and me, as Mom wanted when she was fully capable of making that decision. Greenwood was examining the will now, noting the proper signatures and notarization. Furthermore, I continued, given the evidence of financial exploitation, I'm exercising my power of attorney to remove Mark's access to any of Mom's accounts, effective immediately. You can't do that. Mark stood up, his face flushing dark red. She can, actually, Greenwood said slowly, still reading the power of attorney document. And given what's been presented here, it seems prudent. Whose side are you on? Mark demanded. I'm on the side of proper legal procedure, Greenwood replied stiffly. And it appears that procedure hasn't been followed in preparing this new will. Diane was already gathering her papers, her expression carefully neutral. Perhaps we should reconvene after reviewing these documents more thoroughly? There's nothing to review, I said firmly.
The current will stand. Mark will return the $45,000 he took from Mom's account, and all decisions about Mom's care and finances will go through me as her legally designated agent. Mark stared at me, a mixture of shock and fury on his face. "You've always been jealous," he hissed. "Just because Mom and I understood each other better." I almost laughed. "Is that what you think this is about?" "Mark, I don't care if Mom liked you better. I care that she's taken care of properly, with dignity, for whatever time she has left."
And you think you're the only one who can do that? No, but I'm the only one who's been doing it.
I began packing up my documents.
You're still her son. You're still my brother. That doesn't change. But this scheme ends now.
As I wheeled Mom out of the conference room, Mark called after me.
"This isn't over, Sarah."
I didn't look back. The next few weeks were quiet. Mark returned to Chicago without contacting me again. Through his lawyer, he arranged to repay the money he'd taken from Mom's account, though he insisted it had been a loan he'd always intended to repay. I continued my routine, visiting Mom daily, managing her care, coordinating with her doctors. But something had shifted inside me. For 15 years, I'd done everything for everyone else, putting my own life on permanent hold. I'd accepted it as my role, the practical one, the reliable one, the one who sacrificed. One evening, as I sat beside Mom's bed while she slept, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. There I was at 25, fresh out of graduate school, full of plans. There I was at 30, already looking tired as Dad's health declined. At 35, standing alone in front of Mom's nursing home on the day we moved her in. What had happened to all those plans? The career I'd wanted to build, the places I'd wanted to see, the relationships I'd let fade away because I never had time? The next day I called my friend Elena, who I hadn't seen in months. "I need help," I said when she answered. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, concern in her voice. "Nothing's wrong," I replied, "but I need to figure out how to have a life again, and I think I need friends for that." Elena laughed. "Well, that I can help with." Over the following months, I made small but significant changes. I hired additional help at the nursing home so I could have 2 full days off each week. I joined a hiking group that met on Saturdays. I updated my resume and applied for a part-time consulting position in my field. I still saw Mom every other day. I still managed her care and her finances. But I stopped believing that total self-sacrifice was the only way to show love. 6 months after the confrontation at the lawyer's office, I received a text from Mark. "In town for business. Can we talk?" We met at a coffee shop halfway between Mom's nursing home and his hotel. He looked older somehow, the invincible big brother image finally showing some cracks. "How's Mom?" he asked after we'd gotten our drinks. "About the same," I replied. "She has good days and bad days." He nodded, turning his coffee cup in circles. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about who's been there for her." I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. "I told myself I was too busy," he finally continued. "That my career had to come first, that you were better at the caretaking stuff anyway." He looked up. "But the truth is, I just didn't want to deal with it. It was easier to leave it all to you." "Yes," I agreed simply. "It was." "I'm sorry, Sarah." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry I left you alone with all of it. And I'm sorry about the will thing. I have no excuse for that." I studied my brother's face, looking for the manipulative angle, the hidden agenda. But all I saw was genuine regret. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "I want to do better," he said. "I can't make up for 15 years, but I want to help now, for real this time." I considered this. "Mom would like to see you more often." "I know," he nodded. "I'm looking at projects closer to home, maybe even moving back." "That would be good." I sipped my coffee. "For her, I mean. And maybe for us too?" he asked hesitantly. I thought about the filing cabinet in my basement, still full of evidence against my brother. The anger I'd carried for so long, the resentment that had become part of my identity. "Maybe," I said. "But it will take time." He nodded, accepting this. "I have time." As we finished our coffee, I realized something important. Forgiving Mark wasn't about excusing what he'd done. It was about freeing myself from the weight of resentment I'd carried for so long. Just as standing up to him hadn't really been about the money, it had been about finally valuing myself enough to demand fairness. 3 weeks later, Mark showed up at Mom's nursing home while I was there. He brought sunflowers, her favorite, and placed them in the vase I'd bought months ago. Mom didn't recognize him at first, but when he sat beside her and gently held her hand, something seemed to register. "Mark?" she asked, her voice surprisingly clear. "Yeah, Mom, it's me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled and patted his hand. "My boy, and Sarah." She looked over at me. "My Sarah." I felt tears prick my eyes. "That's right, Mom, we're both here." For a moment, we were just a family again. Damaged, imperfect, but together. Later, as we walked to the parking lot, Mark asked, "How do you do this, year after year?" I considered the question carefully. "I do it because I love her, but I've learned something important recently." "What's that?" "That taking care of her doesn't have to mean giving up myself." I looked at my watch. I had a hiking group meeting in an hour. It took me 15 years to figure that out, but better late than never. Mark nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think Dad would be proud of you. I know I am. I didn't need Mark's approval anymore. But as I drove away from the nursing home, not rushing home to an empty house for the first time in years, but heading toward people who were waiting for me, I felt something shift and settle inside me. I'd spent so many years being the practical solution that I'd forgotten I was also a person with dreams and needs and a life of my own. Standing up to Mark hadn't just protected Mom's wishes, it had broken the spell I'd been under. The spell that said sacrifice was the only form of love, that my worth came only from what I could do for others. Mom still had the sunflowers by her bed. Mark was finding his way back to being the brother I remembered. And I was learning, day by day, that taking care of myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary.
The practical solution had finally found a practical solution for herself.